everybody, and welcome to the Harry Potter Trading Card Game Revival Podcast. My name is Sammy,
I'm Reese.
And I'm Huamin.
and today we're going to do another set talk about what it was like to design one of the sets. So we did HOS about six or 7 months ago, and today we are going to talk about Prisoner of Azkaban and what that set was like to design. So two of us were actually on the design team for that set, and the third is going to be asking us questions as we kind of are going along and throwing some input in, as well as somebody who's now on the design team too. So we want to start just by kind of talking about that this was the first set that we designed after HOS. And so that essentially meant that we had released the first fan-made set out into the world, reception of various sorts, mainly because it was the next Harry Potter set and people were excited about that. And we kind of came to this spot where we had control over the entire next book's sets and kind of what we wanted that to look like. So I guess we can talk briefly, Homan, about our idea for the structure for the three sets from the book. There was Streets of Hogsmeade, and then there was Echoes of the Past. And we attempted, and we'll talk about this later on, but we attempted to give kind of like a theme between all of them and have Streets of Hogsmeade be a bit of a connector set between them.
Attempted is probably like the right word to use here. I don't think the theming on the sets came out all that well. If you kind of squint and look at it when someone tells you what the theme is, like you might be able to see it.
But otherwise, it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, keep that in mind
Yes.
when we talk about things and when we talk about EOTP as well.
Yeah, and we also designed this block, and I call it a block because it's just like the book sets, with the idea that the original first four sets really focused on like a general theme. So like base set was here's everything, Diagon Alley was here specifically Diagon Alley stuff, you had the Quidditch Cup, and then Adventures kind of had a bunch of wrap-up stuff from the first book, and Chamber of Secrets was probably going to follow a similar trend to that. And so when we did this, we wanted to do it chronologically. So do you remember what chapter we said we were going to break the set at?
Oh God.
It was like chapter like 13 or 12 or something.
Yeah, something around there.
Right. I don't remember the exact chapter that we broke it at. I remember we wanted to break it, and we wanted to have, and you guys will probably notice, POA has only cards from the first half of the book. Maybe he has actually one Harry learned eavesdropping about Sirius Black, right?
I think so. Yeah, that should be around where it was.
Why did you guys decide on that spot?
It was
I
four
think that
years
was-
ago.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was just like we have enough to make 90 cards with like 90 card ideas if we go up to like chapter 12 or 13 or wherever.
Right, so it's more mechanic based, like we have the cards from the set, not like this is a natural pause in the story or something you can take a stop at. Yeah.
And I think also because we wanted to bridge the two books, and this was the first like mini set that we did, stopping it at that point also just kind of made it very natural. Here's the first 12 or 13 chapters. We're breaking it when Harry sneaks into Hogsmeade. So we're going to do a mini set for Streets of Hogsmeade, and then we're going to finish up with the rest of the book. So it also just kind of, I think, tried to make it feel a little more natural.
Yeah.
Whether that came through or not is another question, but we tried.
Yeah, that's probably a question that we'll be asking each other a lot over the course of this discussion. I mean, just learning experiences. This is our first time trying to like think about, all right, what's the theme of a set? Like, how do we weave this into a lot of cards? And didn't weave it into enough cards, so that's okay.
Taking those lessons and putting them into our sets now. And hopefully you guys will see that with the next set coming out and the sets moving forward too.
A little bit more focused on color identity and mechanical identity.
So this set also introduced a bunch of things. And so we want to kind of talk about that. As I mentioned, this was kind of the set where we really had full control over like what this block was going to look like. We weren't really wrapping up Wizards of the Coast stuff from Chamber of Secrets, so we were able to do like kind of our own thing. And so there were a lot of conversations at the time that were happening. And I think the first conversation that isn't on our list, but I'm thinking about that we should talk about, is with this and being the first time that we had kind of full control over stuff, we had a huge conversation. I think it lasted probably like 2 to 3 months. And then I think Frizz and I just kept bringing it up about whether we should introduce a sixth color with
Yeah.
this.
Oh my gosh.
PTSD.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was a conversation.
It was a long conversation because the conversation focused around both should there be another color? What should that be? What would it do? How would it fit in? And then also, should there be a new type of card? What would that be? How would that fit in? And there was just a lot of conversation. And this set, I think, took like a year and a half to make. And I think a large part of that was really just deciding on these larger, like game design things that would influence so much moving forward if we decided to pull the trigger on one or the other.
So, from an outsider's perspective, that's like a really interesting piece to talk about because there's so many things about it. The community often talk about a sixth color as well, and because there's a big cry out for like representation across the other lessons they have. And of course, PoA is very much one where defense against the dark arts would again come up as like a obvious potential choice with, you know, learning how to fight off the Death Eaters and stuff like that. So what was driving that conversation, if it was, even in particularly with you and Frizz, was that lore based or was that mechanics you wanted another design space to move into?
That's a loaded question. So if it was up to me, there would be like 10 different colors, and this would be Pokemon where they add a new one every 2 years, and it just is very confusing because I would just make a lesson for every single like class that existed. There's obviously people on the team like Quomin who have a much more level-headed approach, and that is how we ended
If
up
you want to
with
call it level-headed, sure.
Well, that's how we ended up with the keyword because we wanted to introduce like a dark arts class. We wanted to introduce a defense against the dark arts class. There was a divination class potentially introduced. So there were a lot of ideas thrown out there. And it always came back to like, well, where does this fit in given the other colors and what the other colors do? And like, what gap is this going to fill? And it was a lot of good questions asked to like put things on pause a little bit and just do more thinking from like a larger design view.
We appreciate you, Humin.
Thank you. I do think that the biggest reason why we didn't move forward with a new lesson type was that we couldn't find like a mechanical identity that would feel distinct from the other 5 lesson types. Like if we did divination and it was like, oh, it's all about looking on the top of your deck and stacking your deck and all that stuff. And all the other colors kind of do that too. And that's like in their kind of domain. Like thinking about defense against the dark arts or dark arts cards, like are they going to be focused on like, oh, protecting yourself, stopping your opponent from dealing damage to you, stopping your opponent from like playing cards or protecting your hand? That's all like stuff that other colors do.
Yeah, mechanically, there's not a wide open space in the game design that needs to be filled by another color. I get what you mean. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think we also talked about that if we introduced like a dark arts, I think dark arts were like a defense against the dark arts were like the top competitors for a new lesson type. And I think that one of the reasons as well is because at this point I think there were 6 full sets for the game. And if we introduce a new color, we almost have to just do a set purely of that color in order to give that lesson type enough cards to be able to be a viable thing that doesn't just like there was a larger issue with introducing a new color as well, and so that bled into a lot of the conversations too.
It could be folded into other colors, and awkwardness of putting in a new color meant we went with like the keyword route of where we would just take these cards that had like this divination, this dark arts flavor, and then we just slapped divination or dark art or dark onto it. And we got where we are now.
Yeah, and I think a consequence of that is it really made the keywords much more important because that was how we did quote unquote like a new lesson type. Yeah. And so you'll see a lot more keywords, I think, with specific mechanics or design ideas from that set moving forward because of that conversation.
Yeah, like the mechanical identity of keywords is, well, okay, if you look at the mechanical identity of keywords in Dark, it's not, or in PoA especially, is not very apparent. I don't think EOTP we even landed on like what we really wanted Dark to be doing. It was mostly like a descriptor of, hey, these are cards that have like dark flavor on them. Let's just slap the keyword on.
Yeah, I think we're refocusing through
Yeah.
from Goblet of Fire moving forward. And I think you're going to see that a lot more in the next set release as well, that Dark really does have kind of a firmer mechanical idea around it.
Identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely much stronger, very very distinct as well, because obviously the colors it will be in will have other things in them, and I think it'll be very easy to
Mhm.
tell from the mechanic which card is dark and which card isn't.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even if you're not looking at the keyword
The
line.
the keyword,
Yeah.
yeah, you'll be able to see and know immediately.
But out of the color conversation, Frizz and I were
Oh
very
God.
adamant that we that we
Yeah.
wanted to do something new and whatnot. And this set did a couple of like smaller new things that we'll talk about later. But one of the larger new things that kind of came out of that was Frizz and I were like, okay, well, we still want to do something new, change things a little bit. And both of us really dislike adventures as a card type. And so we kind of pushed the idea of events and creating this new card type called events that we could kind of go wide open with what they could do, maybe make them a little more powerful because only one could be in play at a time. And so we ended up with events, and that's kind of how they came to be. And so a lot of the events at this point have like a triggered ability when they at a certain point during your turn they'll do something, and a lot of them kind of are a detriment to your opponent. Some of them do help you, but that's kind of where the events had come from.
So we got the
Yeah.
best of both worlds, really. We didn't get the chaotic dishevelment of the game through 10 different lesson types, and we got one of the great new card types instead.
Listen, those 10 lesson types would have been fantastic. There would have been a Muggle lesson type. There would have been
Oh
one for
God.
like, I know.
No.
Oh,
No, don't.
jeez.
There
We're
would have
cutting
been
that
so much.
conversation here.
I play this math lesson. Yay.
Exactly. Exactly. Math,
Um,
math and physics. If you know those, you know everything. But yeah, so
sure, sure.
that's kind of where the events had come from,
Yeah.
and why there's not a six color edit, and why there will never be at this point. We are just too far moved forward at this point to add a new lesson type, which
I
I will always be sad about, but it is what it is.
Yeah, Sammy, Mr. 10 lesson types over
So
here.
I'm going to
But
throw in an interesting historical tidbit. So back in the day, before the interwebs were what they are today, there were chat rooms, and people could just like sit in chat rooms, and it was a weird world. And back in the day, there was a chat room for the game, and a random Wizard of the Coast employee would go sit in this chat room, and it would be a different person every time. And people would ask questions, and there would just be this running chat of questions. And this is where most of the rulings on Pojo came from, actually, was this chat room. Some random employee just saying, this is my interpretation. And now that's what we use to rule the game. And that's why there's so many problems with the rule system. That's a different conversation. But during one of these chat rooms, I think it was during Diagon Alley, probably because it was a set after Quidditch Cup. One of the questions was there was a rumor apparently at the time that somebody had heard from somebody that there was going to be a six color introduced. And so they asked this right after Quidditch Cup had come out, which introduced the Quidditch lesson type. And the response from the employee was, I can't confirm nor deny. And I think the question was specifically about whether Defense Against the Dark Arts was going to be the sixth lesson type. So I will hold forever that there should be a six color because of what that Wizards of the Coast employee said and they were designing it. And it just never saw the light of day. And I will
it's
forever be sad about that.
See,
it,
Sammy, this is where we go off the deep end, because
I
you choose the one employee answer,
do.
but hate
Yep.
the rest of them for the rulings.
Yep.
Ah,
I know that I was very not in favor of a new lesson type, and I think I was somewhat not in favor of a new card type, but I was less
Probably,
not
yeah.
in favor of a new card type than I was
Yes.
of a new lesson type.
Yes.
So
And
that is why we have events.
in retrospect, I mean, now that events are out and we see a lot of them in every set, basically, what's your thoughts on it now that it's become sort of a more of a main games like game state?
It's a necessary evil.
Is it okay? Necessary
Yeah.
evil. Interesting. Okay. So you
as
still
as our
prefer that they
adventures.
don't exist?
I don't know if I would prefer that they don't exist. Like, it's just nice from like a flavor perspective, which is like
Definitely.
most of the reason I feel like we made events is that a lot of these card ideas are very hard to portray in the original eight card types, especially if you want some sort of like idea and then you want it to be a card in play. There's a lot of baggage associated with all of the other card types. Everything except for items has like gigantic amounts of baggage associated with it.
I
Matches
think
only want to
items have
play
a lot of baggage as
adventures.
well. So I think with the items, the issue becomes that the cards that they build to help support items, like Draco Malfoy and Arthur Weasley, may really restrict the design space of where we can go with items because of what they do. And events
Hmm.
open us up, I think, to be able to do other things on a permanent that's not a character that has a color and a lesson cost that we can do other stuff with, and we don't have to worry about those two cards and then the other random item cards as well.
I would always
I
come from the other direction, Sammy, as well, because I this is why I love that you guys made items. I think they're
Events, but
I
yes.
sorry, events. Sorry,
yeah,
that you made the
we
events.
made the item.
Just as like to counter your point where like there are some cards that make items stronger than they should be, and that's hard to balance. From the other perspective, if you want to mechanically put an effect on something that sits on the field and lasts, but is gated out by a mana cost or a color, then you're stuck with only items, and
Yeah,
anything that answers as well as enhances them is like single narrow path. So the
yeah,
fact that you guys made events is fantastic, because now there's items or events that can sit on the
yeah.
field and have continuous ongoing effects. Whereas before, if it was just items, you have obviously the biggest answer to everything, table troubles for items,
Yeah,
and
table
then
trouble's a problem.
the biggest enhancer, which is Draco, right? So you've got both of them, but now we don't need to just say like, okay, this is the only way we could possibly get a permanent effect on a Quidditch card for 8 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
You can now go, well, we can also do it on an event, and then you can bypass some of that balancing act where it's very, very go no go, as opposed
Hmm.
to now you've got, well, maybe they're playing item removal, or maybe now they're playing event removal, which I think is like deviating a lot from POA conversation at the moment.
Hmm.
Is definitely something where we consider now moving forward, trying to push events as a major card type in the game. So
Yeah,
a fantastic thing to come out of POA though.
we definitely had similar lines of thought, I think, while we were making events, and it's somewhat why I believe that they're a necessary evil, in that we did need a diversification of permanents in play that do have mana cost, sorry, lesson power cost.
Lesson cost,
Um,
yeah.
that's like have a static effect in play that sits there and doesn't
Yeah.
have all this baggage. Events have their own baggage now. They're all unique.
They're all
I
unique, yep.
Yeah, I don't see this changing anytime soon. There might be a non-unique event in the future, but don't count on it. I'll fight against that tooth and nail.
I probably also will. I know
That's
I know Riss wants them not to be, but
I do that, yeah, just as a mirror image to the items, not necessarily for any special flavor reason, but again to the mechanical reason. But the
yeah.
restriction's not horrible. It just does sort of leave a little bit more of a gap in the design space that you'd want to
Yeah,
fill, I think.
yeah,
But
of course.
Yeah.
not the
Um,
worst gap. The fact that they're there is much better to begin with. So I'm happy with that.
yeah,
I will always fight for there are a few events that you can make not unique, like a trip to Hogsmeade or something. There was plenty of those. So, but I'm not going
yeah.
to pull too much hair out of my head for it. So
With events, there were two things that we tried to do as well. One was the removal for them. Initially, we wanted it to be very limited. And I think initially, when there was maybe just one transfig that removed them and that was it. Maybe there was a second card I can't think of. And then kind of
I think.
last minute, we had designed Filch, Hogwarts caretaker, to remove events, and then we took him out of the set. And then I don't
Yes.
remember what card we ended up removing last minute, but we took out some other card last minute and then put Filch back in. And I don't remember what that was, but it was a way so that everybody would be able to handle events, and that way you wouldn't have to run like transfig in order to get rid of them or something. So we
But
tried to kind of balance them, uncertain how powerful they would be. We tried to balance them a bit in that way.
yeah, but like everyone's running transfig anyways, so it's not a big ask to
Sad,
be like
yes.
you have to have transfig in order to remove events.
You're right.
But yeah, filch was like a large stopgap on like events, and event-based decks can only be so powerful because there is the threat of filch that can just remove them all. And the fact that Filch Hogwarts Caretaker has never taken off in decks means that maybe it's fine for him to exist.
Pe People have definitely sideboarded him. Like in tournaments, he's usually a one of in a sideboard for like maybe a third of the decks, but then I don't know he's ever really like main boarded at that point.
Obviously, this isn't in PoA, but like one of the only few like super scary events is confronting Black from OTP. Not many people play Marauders.
Well, yeah, so we ended up having to figure out what else we were going to do with events. And so we ended up making that keyword into kind of like the event deck. And that's kind of where that had come from. Was Harry in this set or was he in Echoes of the
He was in the
Past?
set, I think.
Yeah, he was. And so
Uh,
we tried to make that like kind of the starter for a Marauder deck or an event deck. Not super powerful, but we threw him out there.
yeah, he's cool.
Yeah.
The like events not needing power that matches means that you can play stuff like Egyptian Holiday, 12 years, which is cool.
And on top of introducing events and us trying to do more of this keywordy stuff to take the place of a new lesson type, we also introduced the first multi-card type card, sure,
Yeah.
which was Monster Book of Monsters. And I don't remember the exact conversation around this, like whether we were going to make it a creature or an item, or we intended from the start to be like a creature item. But yeah, we kind of dabbled into this realm for the first time, and eventually we would see character creatures and more creature items. And I think that's it so far, right?
I think so. Yeah. Don't get Frizz started on like spell lessons. He's still trying to make those.
Spell lessons, a location creature, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, like
Oh God.
I'll fight against those. I am still fighting against those. That is a battle that I have taken
Location
upon
creature, I
myself.
have to assume that was going to be Whomping Willow.
That would have
The
been a good idea,
look,
but no. There's something for potentially the future that will come out in two sets, potentially.
yeah,
If
I'm
Frizz and I have our way, it will come out.
I'm
I want you
extremely
to.
unhappy right now about it, but
I
you
like the
know,
idea. I want to see that card.
It's gonna be
no, no,
awesome.
no, 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 no. I do think Monster Book of Monsters went through like 0 iterations though. I want to say that like a couple people were very happy with the idea of this item creature, and then it being a 1/1 for like 4 that provided one lesson power was like very, it just went on there and then no one touched it.
It did start as an item creature.
Yeah,
That
okay.
was a 3 cost,
Oh, it
1/1.
was 3 cost. Oh,
Yeah,
well,
at first, and then we were
okay.
like, no. And then it went up to 4.
Well, I
I
feel
think
like from a design space, like, well, if you're trying to build a deck, like, what deck does this go in, right? It's if you're low to the ground creatures, then you don't really need a ramp too far, much further past 4. If you're playing
uh,
big creatures, then it's basically just a lesson, really,
yeah.
because you want to get to the creatures that are doing 6 damage per turn, not 1 damage per turn. So, sort of like, where does it fit?
I mean, it gives a little bit of chip damage. If this thing gets like 3 or 4 damage out and it was a lesson and it didn't get
It's
killed,
worth
and
it.
yeah, the problem is like it dies to so many things. It dies to like a stiff breeze,
It
and then you're down
does.
a lesson.
Well, and that's a really good point is creating the first card type or the first card that had 2 card types on it. We had to think about the rules and how do we like, define things that target items, creatures, whatever. And so we kind of had to make a more generic ruling about cards that interact with 1 card type will also affect cards that have 2 card types, including the one or whatever. And so it kind of led us to do a bit of a rules rework in small ways to make this work and kind of future-proof it a bit for what would become
Yeah.
character creatures and other stuff like that too.
Yeah, but character creatures made a bigger mess of things just because character has a lot of baggage associated with that card type. So,
Yes, that'll be a great conversation for the Echoes of the Past
yeah.
design talk.
Yeah, we could talk for like 10 years on how many iterations the Marauder
Yeah.
Animagi cards went through. That was really something, but also not related to PoA. Because back in our PoA discussion, we like had no idea where Marauders were going to go. they kind of just like exist as not a very big part of the set. If we jump all the way down to our difficult cards to design section and talk about
Sure.
Marauders map for a little bit, that thing went through like 50 different iterations, and I'm not even joking when I say 50.
Yep.
I think the one of the more play tested ones were like they put like counters on itself and it was an alternate win condition. It was weird.
Yeah, there's a lot of very interesting effects. We had like you can put a card from your hand into play. You can play a card from your discard pile.
You can only have one in your deck, and like it started in play or something. Weird things associated with that card.
So the question I have from the outsider and like getting on my high horse and sticking my nose up as a designer now myself. Um, what was the thought process of this? Because obviously, generally, when we're designing cards, we're trying to fill a mechanical slot, or we're trying to fill or give a card an effect that feels very connected to its lore. I assume that's
Mhm.
the direction the Marauders map was going, but like it feels very undirection going through 50 iterations for a card that has a very distinct lore to fit to.
I think it was
Yeah.
just like we kind of wanted the Marauders to be like an actual deck,
Yeah,
and we're like,
and
okay,
focused around events too.
Yeah, the Marauders map was kind of like oh, this is the giant, like the big set piece card that all the Marauder decks are gonna play,
Yeah,
which Marauder
centerpiece of the
decks,
decks. Yeah.
we wanted it to have like a big flashy, like, let's build around this card. And it ended up, not actually being that, but
I mean, getting up to 9 power and getting a free adventure or event every turn into your
yeah,
hand, like that is great, but there's also a
it's a
question of
decent
like which
effect, yeah.
events are you pulling? And that's a whole
Uh,
nother conversation.
in
Yeah, so
PoA, not much.
so going back on this now, so the takeaways I'm hearing from you, Sammy, is if obviously wanting it to be a centerpiece, you need to have maybe the 9 mana is a bit high, and it's better to pull back on the strength of the effect to make it lower, so that all decks that want to play Marauders would play it because it costs cheap enough all the time. And then the second piece would be getting a free adventure or event every turn is cool, free card that I want that I can sort of tutor exactly the effect I want from my deck, but then it sounds like that was sort of just left in the open and not really any events or adventures to support that sort of toolbox like intent.
Yeah, and it could have been a situation that we knew the second set we were going to focus more heavily on event, on other things that just like would relate to it. And so maybe we were like, this is going to be for a future deck that isn't necessarily in existence right now. And
Right.
that also could have been like part of the world that we were living in as designers. Because there was a lot that we talked about that we were like, this
Yeah.
will come out. We just aren't sure when it will come out, and that could have been a large part of it too.
Also, like, we're kind of out of the PoA block book. I don't know what to call it, superset. And like, yeah, the Marauders chapter is closed, but that's not to say that like we are never gonna see Marauders again. I
Mhm.
think there's going to be like a set that focuses on the Marauder era, whether that's like a mini set or something on like James Potter and Lily Evans their time in Hogwarts, and we will see more Marauder cards at some point. Just that's in the
Agreed.
far, far future. So for people that like Marauders, it should come back at some point.
With more direction.
Yes. Well, maybe just with more stuff that actually supports it, but
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
Uh,
But we designed. I'm gonna just continue on this list.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. There were a couple of Marauder cards from this set. I solemnly swear was another one of them. That was a Marauders card, and
Mhm.
this one again, we tried to just kind of make enough of these keyworded cards to maybe do something in the future. But this was kind of difficult because ramp in the game is difficult to design and balance. And this was other than what's the one from '05 that discards a lesson? Is it research?
Research, yeah. What a interesting card.
Yes. So that was kind of our baseline for I solemnly swear. And like, what is a good balance for I solemnly swear if we're going to go fetch 3 lessons potentially? And so that was very difficult to design. So we had to fit it into the Marauder keyword, which doesn't really do anything with them, but it does give you lessons, and it was rampy. So it was kind of like doing 2 things at once, maybe a little unfocused, but it was doing 2 things at once.
We also knew that EOTP was going to be more discard focused. So I think at the time we also thought that like 3 cards from your hand was not going to be as bad in decks that wanted to play it. To be fair, like it's a pretty punishing cost without
It's so punishing.
Revelations. But with Revelations, it's a lot more playable. We did think that like stacking your graveyard with things was going to be a little bit stronger than it was at PoA set release. And it is, but also kind of not. Not enough, maybe. I don't know. It
Yeah.
sees some play. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm okay with the card.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit here is it 3 cost is way better than anything a little bit higher for 5. And
Hmm.
the offset of 3 discard is adds 3 of anything, which is great, and it
Hmm.
searches your deck for them, so you don't need the lessons then and there or anything like that. So I think it's a good
Yeah.
overall balance. 3 maybe feels a little too much, but I have seen it played
Yeah.
in tournaments even, so I think it's definitely a good balance. And then we've got Revelations to consider now anyway. So
I mean, there's decks that want to play it, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
It's more than some cards can say.
Another card that was difficult to design was Unworthy Trick, and not necessarily because of the effect. Well, it is because of the effect. But there was
Yeah.
this huge conversation around, okay, so we're going to do potentially 10 damage, but does it count as damage? Does it not count as damage? Is it going to be reveal? But then when you reveal, where do these cards sit? Do they stay in the deck? Do they come out of the deck? How do you manage this? If you don't hit the 3 lessons, do we then say that you're doing that much damage? Do we not call it damage at all because we wanted it to interact with like the matches and stuff? And just figuring out like what this was gonna look like in terms of the rule system was so complicated.
how does it
And
work with 12 years?
you just deal less damage. Same with any prevention. Like if you
Yeah.
prevent 6 of Unworthy Tricks damage, you're only flipping 4 cards. And
Yeah, it would just flip 2 less.
if there's not enough lessons in there, then the damage sticks. It's actually very good in those situations. I think we were also in that like world where there's only like 3 zones, which is
Yeah.
sorry, 4 zones? Yeah, four
Four, yeah.
zones. Your hand, your deck, the play area, and your discard pile. So Unworthy Trick was like if you revealed like they're still in your deck because we didn't have another zone. And we
Yeah.
still don't have another zone for like revealed cards from your deck. We also like the theming of the card is like you're winning matches unfairly. So we
Yes.
really wanted it to count towards those matches that say like deal 8 damage to your opponent or something like that. So if it was like revealing, it would have to state like this counts as like damage dealt from matches or whatever, which would be
Yeah.
really awkward. So I'm pretty happy where we landed on the design. Maybe it could have costed 5 instead of 6. 10 is a lot of damage though.
Overall, in the end, basically the takeaway is like the damage is just damage. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
just it's putting the stuff back afterwards, and that's it.
And it had that cool interaction with
Chamber of
Chamber of
Secrets.
Secrets,
Yeah.
Yep.
as probably people know.
You bring
Anyways,
up a really good point that Unworthy Trick, we didn't have like another zone with which to do things. And there was another card designing that also was difficult to design because
oh
again, the
boy.
game didn't have a zone for this. And the rules were loose. And that is Flight of the Fat Lady. And this was particularly difficult because when you play a card in the game, the rules say that anything you play just goes into play. And so spells are then like temporarily in play while you're playing them, which is kind of weird. And so we were like, well, if you play Flight of the Fat Lady, does it count itself? Because it cares about the number of cards in play. I think we made like a weird like FAQ about it that it doesn't count itself or
Yeah,
something, which is not
yeah,
obvious
I
on
think
the
so.
card.
It was like sidestepping the issue.
Yeah.
It was definitely we're not going to talk about the
Yep.
rules. We're just going to say this is how this card works. Ad hoc ruling it.
Yes, which was not good.
Yeah, don't do that, folks.
Fix your rule system before you make cards like this,
Yeah.
which we
Um,
have now done. We have added in a spell zone, mainly to just get rid of weird interactions like this or other weird interactions, but also like play should be a place for permanence. Play should not be a place for a quick spell. So we made a spell zone, so everything is just in this separate zone, and it just cleans up so much.
it's for mostly for Fight of Fat Lady and for Tea with Moody. Thank you, Tea with
Yes.
Moody, Flight of Fat Lady. I appreciate
Yes.
you. And then, I guess interestingly enough, Tea with Moody is one of the few ways that you can have 2 cards in the spell zone at the same time, I believe, for a very brief moment. maybe that's going to cause problems in the future and we'll need to do something about it. I hope not. I don't want to live in that world. So I choose to put my head in the sand.
Continuing on the cards that were difficult to design. And I think we've also resolved this issue a little bit in some other ways, maybe. But the Standard Book of Spells grade
Oh God.
3
Yeah.
was also a huge conversation. And
Yeah.
Riss, I'm hoping that you are feeling like less of a headache when designing cards now because we cleaned up a lot of this stuff. This set just had so many headaches because we again wanted to kind of take some ownership of like this was our first book set that we were doing fully without influence from WotC and what they had previously done in the same book. And so we wanted to do these new things. And with Standard Book, we wanted to give stuff one more damage whenever you played a spell. But then there was a question of like, should it just add one damage or should the book itself do one damage? And there were weird things with like the original Hagrid where it says
Oh
like
God.
whenever you do damage, you do more
Jesus.
damage. It's not, it just does more damage. There's just a lot of wording stuff that if you read it literally, the timing and everything just is so confusing and doesn't make sense. But if you read it a little more within like the rules system and give it some gray area, it makes more sense. And so this book and like what should do the extra damage was a point of contention.
And now we just have this. It pings you like 700 times when someone plays Honeydukes and plays like 15
Yep.
candies in a turn. And that's what we have to live with. Original Hagrid also is written in such a way that it forced us to change the modifier rulings, try to toe around the weirdness of like the Pojo rulings on Hagrid and how it works with prevention and stuff like that.
By having the book do one damage, it introduced this really weird area where, for example, if your opponent had 12 years, 12 years could prevent like the spell damage and then prevent the one damage from the book.
Yeah.
And so rather than just kind of like add to that total, you now had separate instances of damage. And it kind of acted like creatures in that way, where like you had these different sources and interactions became a little more meaningful, maybe. I don't think that was really the intent, but that's kind of a consequence of a
Not at
lot of
all.
it.
That's what happens when you have this permanent in play that just keeps pinging. It's what we live with. We live in a world where events exist, and
And not a dark arts lesson type.
yeah, not a. I was figuring out, trying to figure out a way to say that. That wouldn't hurt your
So sad.
feelings.
I will always be sad about that. Another card that I don't think it was really difficult to design in terms of like a ruling standpoint, but just we could not land on what this card should do is Firebolt, which is
Boy.
also like a headliner card of the set a little bit. The art number one is amazing, as is the map art as well.
Who is it? Sophia
Yeah, for
did
Firebolt.
Firebolt?
Absolutely
Okay.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
But Firebolt had crazy ideas initially, such as like providing 3, 4 power, doing lots of random stuff where you could just like auto win matches, a whole bunch of stuff.
It also used to have like the 8 costs, but like be cheaper if you did something for it. And
Yeah, we
then
tried to reduce the cost in some weird way.
And then it just became an Arthur beatstick where you'd like play it for 5, but it actually had 8 costs. So Arthur was hitting with for 8 with it, and it wasn't
Yep.
actually functioning as what the text on the card was doing, which was annoying. Yeah, it's sitting at 8 costs now. Its effect is powerful, but it's not. It might not be powerful enough for an 8 cost card,
No,
but
I think the match is restrictive enough where it's hard to really have this at 8 power.
you can like use it in kind of like this Quidditch control-ish kind of build, I think. I played around with it for a little bit. It's especially with cards like Turbulent Flight now. Maybe it'll go somewhere. Out of Control is always very good, and then going from 8 to 10 with the Firebolt just lines up very well for Out of Control. It's a
Yeah,
card. It's playable.
it's a card.
Um, Possibly not competitively, but maybe.
Another card that was, I don't think it was really much of like a debate whether we wanted to do this. I think it was like lore reasons. And I remember one of our design
Yes.
calls, like we literally
Yes.
just dug into like the dark webs to find an answer to this. But Professor Hagrid is a professor and is a wizard, which is awesome. So you can start him, whereas you couldn't start
Yeah.
the original Hagrids. And we had this huge conversation about like, well, he is a professor now. And we wanted an alternative, I think, as well to Sprout for creature decks that could do more than just plants. And Hagrid kind of was that, which was cool. We had to decide whether he actually was a wizard and therefore could be a starter or not. And that
Yes.
led into like finding random like Rowling interviews from like a decade ago, and it was a whole bunch of like random stuff to justify to ourselves that lore wise this made sense.
I think another part of his design was a lot of lesson providing professors. They're used to like provide access to their color without actually running those types of lessons. So one of the reasons why Professor Hagrid works with Care of Magical Creature lessons themselves is that we wanted to avoid just like this, oh, you can just play him and then open up a new color
Yeah.
for free.
Yeah, like I think Flitwick does that because it like requires you to pull back a charms card, but it was
Hmm.
a one-time use and it just it's not
It
bad.
It also doesn't really because you can play all your charms cards just by running Flitwick without charms lesson. But like Hagrid, you can't actually use his ability without actually playing Care of Magical Creatures lessons. He also gives like kind of he's supposed to work with like the cards that discard or the creatures that discard Care of Magical Creatures lessons, but we talked about research a
Yes.
while ago with I solemnly swear. Hagrid is very good with research.
Research
And
Forbidden Corridor.
shout outs to Hagrid Forbidden Corridor. Definitely something that we were watching when we printed Hagrid.
So
Yeah.
a note for Hagrid though, out of our last three tournaments, he's the most played starter.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like super popular after he came out. Like people
Oh
were
yeah.
really onto this, like, I'm gonna play all the baby dragons. I'm gonna play like okay, people didn't play Norbert because Norbert's pretty hard to play, but
But like
baby
Forest Troll
dragons,
and
Force
Wild
Troll.
Boar, stuff like that.
But actually in
Um,
tournaments too, like the November,
Yeah.
December, February tournament. So
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I just
Uh,
think that speaks to
super
how
popular.
well that discard ability really helps you a lot. I mean, giving you the draw and the lesson back
mhm.
is just everything.
It's good. I'm pretty happy where he came out like power level wise. So
And the
yeah.
art on him is also fantastic.
Yeah.
Vlad, as normal, does a great job.
Yeah. You have Boggart on this list on the last card of difficult cards design. To be honest, like I don't remember anything about the design conversation of Boggart.
So I don't have it on here necessarily because it was hard to design, but because similar to like Unworthy Trick and Flight of the Fat Lady, it was just kind of like this new thing, and we had to think about like how are we going to represent this star power idea? Do we just
Mhm.
kind of copy paste from other card games? Do we do something else? There were a couple of different ideas with that. And so it was just
Yeah.
the first card that kind of introduced a varying damage per turn, whereas no other card really varies in the same way right now.
And I think no card sense has also, though that may change with the next set, so watch out.
So given all the problems you had, what were the best ones, the best cards that came out of the set for you guys? Like what were your two favorites?
Yeah, despite the problem children of the set. My two favorite cards are actually both potions. I really enjoy 12 Years, mainly because it switches from one effect into providing power, and I think that's just an interesting design space, one that we hopefully do more of in the future in various ways. And it's just like a really great early game card that helps you early game prevent damage and late game ramp to what you need. I just think it's a great design. And then I really enjoyed Destroyed Broom because cards that provide power, especially after Goblet of Fire, are very powerful and played in a lot of decks. And the number of times I played Destroyed Broom and had my opponent just say like, well, now I can't do the thing on my next turn and it delays them by a turn is just fantastic. It's great tempo. It just really helps you a lot.
Quite like
Those are
the
some.
the design space of the destroyed broom sort of thing. This one we see a lot in those 4 power cost
Yeah.
potions cards, right?
Yeah.
So, but that design space of temporarily throwing your opponent off, like it could be really useful. It could almost be like a oh, what's the 7 transfiguration one? How am I forgetting this?
Deboning.
Yeah, it's almost like a deboning if you hit the
Yeah.
right timing for it, right? But it's
Mhm.
not strictly a deboning where you're just gonna loop it and your opponent gets no turns. So it's a
Yeah.
skill testing card. It's quite a good design space, but not always powerful enough to see play.
Destroyed Broom, though, is one of the more like generic cards just because there are so many non-lesson cards that provide power run very often. Especially, we were just talking about lesson providing professors.
Yep.
It shuts down their access to colors sometimes, which is very strong. Poor McGonagall, if she's not providing a transfig lesson, what is she doing in her life?
Yeah, it could be very useful. Like destroyed brooms, you could sort of say it almost acts like a invisibility potion. Sometimes if you're playing against McGonagall, right, you turn her transfiguration. People generally won't play transfiguration lessons to provide the power if they got McGonagall. So yeah,
And I think
giving
that's
all
a
your
really interesting place that I think at least I want to try to move to is I don't want people to just rely on their professors to give them a color like that. Like I want to force them to build decks in a more creative way and build decks to anticipate that this could be something and they can't just like put 24 creature lessons and start McGonagall or something and just be fine. I want that threat there, so they have to actually be more creative in deck building.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
hard design space to balance, right? Because
yeah,
So hard.
yeah,
definitely.
we want that interaction because the starting character is generally a non-interactive space, but then you don't want to just turn off everyone's like build around or something like that if they're playing like a Angelina or Madame Maxime or something like that. You don't want to go like, yeah, we could just turn that off and they're going, well, now my deck's not gonna do anything. This is not fun for me. But
Yeah.
then you don't want it to be this invincible zone of like, oh well, you can't touch me. This is what my getting for free. So
My absolute favorite card in the set is Professor Remus Lupin. I just think that the effect is really nice. The way that he can hit both your opponent's discard pile and something in play, the restrictions on the ability to hit both of those things, where you need to have both targets, one in play and one in their discard pile is extremely restrictive, but also just removing your opponent's things from play with just an action is very powerful.
It's a
And
great card.
yeah, everything comes together really well. I think it's also kind of on brand because he's a defense against the dark arts professor. So he's like protecting you by removing your opponent's threats.
definitely consideration for my character deck going forward now. Just good memory.
Yeah, one of the things that character decks really need is access to removal. When you have like two lessons in play, it's kind of hard to play the good removal cards. And
Not anymore. We'll
eh,
see how he goes. See how he
yeah,
goes next tournament.
yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see. But yeah, Lupin's your one-stop answer to all permanents, except you need to have some way to deal damage.
That's a fine. We've got Reader. We can
Yeah,
do stuff. We got Grip Hook. We can discard their cards.
yeah, so like Lupin Rita Grip Hook kind of fills into that like character control, slow burn type of style, which is cool. My other second favorite card is kind of meme, but I really like the North Tower just because it provides some extremely funny game states where sometimes you don't want to play your cards because they have like this draw a card attached to them, and then you're like, I really don't want to give my opponent two cards when I play this. Or you find yourself like passing your action because like you don't want to spend your action to draw a card because your opponent's going to have two cards now. And then there's also the flip side where you can play a whole bunch of cards that do proc the North Tower a lot, and then you just fill up your opponent's hand and you pray that you're going to hit a grip hook or something before you get destroyed by their entire hand of cards that they are going to use to destroy you.
I think there's also a weird like little thing you can do. Was it with like Peeves causes troubles or something? It's janky as hell. It's not good, but
Yeah,
you can pair it with some cards and it does some other like minimal damage that is not like winning worthy at all. But it's got cool little janky stuff.
I don't see it being a tournament contender. Any deck that relies on the North Tower is probably not a good deck, but it's probably a funny deck. Riss, what about you? What are your favorite cards from PoA?
My absolute favorite from the set was Azkaban. I think yeah,
Yikes.
I love the interaction space of the use more action. So Azkaban being the blanket overall for whatever your opponent's deck's doing, I really like.
Mhm.
I definitely feel that's the space that potions should be in is a little bit of that denial stuff. Obviously with it, but it's not a like your opponent can't play anything like deboning, for
Mhm.
example. It's a sort of like I have to make a choice. I have to be clever about what I'm choosing. Am I choosing spells, creatures, adventures, character?
Yeah.
Is it going to be enough hindrance? So I really like that, and obviously, wanted poster goes along with that, even more specific with the card. So I
Mhm.
really liked that design space because it feels like that's where interaction in this game needs to be. It needs to
Yeah.
be either putting your opponent out with the action costs. So obviously, without any reduction, this turns off characters and adventures entirely. But
Yeah.
there are other ways to get rid of this.
Mhm.
And for spells or creatures, if you're trying to pump out lots of creatures with a low creature deck, this makes it really slow. If you're trying to combo off with spells, doing like 3, 4, 5 different spells a turn by gaining a bunch of actions, suddenly you're actually only playing 1 or 2. So I think it's got a lot of space. Obviously, it has that little bit of a weakness being a location, but Warpo, or what we call Warpo, wanted poster.
You don't mean the Washington Post?
No, not the Washington Post. Yeah, wanted poster. I think is in that realm as well, where it needs direct removal rather than your opponent just playing over top of it with another location. So definitely, Azkaban was my favorite of all the cards in the set. A little bit disappointed that it is a little bit more easy to remove being a location, but I think probably by far my favorite card from this set. My next favorite is a bit further behind, Fred and George beaters. Left field for that one. I don't think it's been talked about at all so far.
Not
But
really. No.
no, I think it turned out maybe a little bit weaker. I did try it in a tournament once, not really a refined deck, but it gives me very strong vibes, very, very similar to a Magic deck as well, which is the Delver deck. It's basically trying to get something in play that does a little bit of damage and then slow your opponent down lots in trying to pretty much figure out what they're going to do in the next turn and I'm going to prevent that particular thing from happening and that sort of thing, just pushing them off the tempo. Fred and George, I tried to build around that with like slower brooms. So it's like a one cost item that gets Fred and George online immediately, and then inherently itself slows your opponent down. But I just think the 2 damage is a little bit too slow, and the deck doesn't have the rest of the support for it. But I still love the idea of Fred and George. Really hope that sort of thing could be supported in the future. Maybe soon. I don't know.
Yeah, the problem is like I think 2 damage per turn on a character is like it's a little bit underwhelming. Like if we just printed a character that said at the beginning or before each of your turns do 2 damage to your opponent, I don't even think I don't think that's going to see play. So like a conditional one is going to be even worse. But also like if you printed a character that said like before each of your turns deal 3 damage to your opponent, like that starts kind of getting a little scary.
This card's also kind of like Troll in the Bathroom, which is an adventure, so it doesn't really start in play and does require the 2 actions and can be solved. It's similar, but Troll in the Bathroom doesn't really see any play because, again, the 2 damage is a little too low.
Well, actually, I might add to that. Troll in the Bathroom has been in a tournament deck.
Well,
a winning tournament deck?
Well, it won some games.
Fair. Very fair.
I might have to amend that if we go back in the record. It may have won some game.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, maybe not matches, but like game wins.
Yeah.
Hey, no, 9th place out of 13. So
it did something.
It's not last.
Yeah, but one of the decks that I liked in like way back when was a Weasley Twins deck that would play Flying to Hogwarts. I would run like 4 copies of Flying to Hogwarts and like 2 copies of, I think, Troll in the Bathroom was the other one that I ran. It might have been Peeves Causes Trouble, though. I'm not exactly sure.
That's what was in my deck. It was Salazar Slytherin, Flying to Hogwarts, Troll in the Bathroom. Those just 0 mana cost 2 damage per turn.
And then you just start proccing Salazar every turn.
Yeah, that was the intent.
Yeah, which is
not good. Not enough.
Yeah, but I think Salazar is a better starter than the Weasley Twins for that now, because like you can pivot into creatures or something, and then now even if they remove your adventure by solving it, by killing it, you're still in the game. It's this like slow, grindy, control-y playstyle where you're making sure that your opponent is only drawing lessons. It's pretty powerful.
The last group of cards I think that we wanted to talk about were the passwords. This was a throwback to the original passwords, which are super janky and weird to play and play against. And so we
very strange.
They're so strange. And so we made 4. And they work together in a similar way to the originals, but their effects vary and don't just do damage. And Homan, I think you had come up actually with the effects for the most part.
Yes.
It feels very you.
I believe I put them up and then they went through almost no discussion and were printed basically from effect to card.
Yeah.
There might have been like slight changes on a couple of them, but yeah, it's probably very me because it's too much text on a card.
But they do also require a lot of text. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, looking like Yu-Gi-Oh cards up in here.
Yeah.
A little
Yeah.
bit.
Looking back, I'm not too happy on them where they ended up because it's just too much text on a card, and they're too complicated. But
But
some
people
people
who
like
play them
them.
like them. Yeah.
Yeah, like it definitely appeals to a specific type of person. I'm
Somebody
not
who
that
likes
person.
chaos and likes to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
Well, the
Yeah,
excitement of the
that's
randomness, right? I think that's a valid way to
yeah.
play the game. You just like the
Throw
high amount
caution
of
to the wind.
variation.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The other card that was associated with the passwords, list of passwords, I actually really like a lot because you're taking a password from a public area. So like your opponent knows
Uh-huh.
exactly what you took back. And then when you play a password and tell them like please guess one of these, like it's so many mind games on did you just play the password that you just picked up or did you not? Anyways, maybe we should move on to cards that we would have done differently. And I see that you've put the North Tower on that list, Sammy. So please tell me
Oh,
about this.
I didn't make this list.
No, I made this
Oh,
list. This
you
is the
made
list.
that
That
list,
was not
Riz?
This
me.
is the list I wanted to ask because I think the biggest thing I took away from looking at all the cards in the set was
Hmm.
there are some that were quite unique in their position and their mechanical effect, but didn't
Hmm.
quite get over the line into competitive area. So
Hmm. Yeah.
probably I think three main cards I want to ask about like what would you guys do differently? I
Hmm.
suppose we'll start with the North Tower, Sammy, because you mentioned that's your favorite card. Like
No, that was me.
Not
what
me.
what
Not me.
Oh, sorry. Well, hold on. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was you mentioned it was one of your favorite cards. So, like, would you have just pushed the power up? Like, what would you have done
Done for
differently?
this card?
Yeah.
Uh, man.
Would you have
If I
tried
wanted
to
it
push more support for it in the set or something? I don't know.
I don't think it actually needs more support. There's like so many cards that just like say draw a card on them, like cantrip
Well,
cards.
yes, I think there's an extra aspect to this, which is
Yeah.
it's very unique in its effect, right? It's a
And
location and it's also the only card that does its thing. So if you're playing a deck built around this, you're gonna have to play a lot of cards that try and find it too, right?
yeah, I don't even know like so let's assume the like craziest interpretation or the craziest effect on this to like get this effect into play, which would be this card starts in play, right?
Yeah.
That'd be wild. And it's also the most pushed you can actually get into playing this card because like it finds itself, it's in play. You don't even have to use the actions to play it. I don't even know if this effect is like playable if it has that text on it.
I think this is like a pure jank card,
Yeah.
and I think it just sits there and there's nothing really to do. I think it's just straight up a
Yeah.
jank, and that's about it.
Yeah. Like, so I don't even know like where you could go to make this effect like tournament playable. So I'm perfectly happy like where it is right now. We were probably a little bit like too conservative with the power cost, maybe. It could possibly have costed like three and still be okay. But as you said, it's like an extremely unique effect. We decided to err, I think, a little bit more on the side of caution to not have a card that like completely warped the metagame because even though I didn't think it would warp the metagame, and I still don't think it would warp the metagame, it may have if it was too accessible.
Did you guys look at pushing it up to three instead of two?
It
It
initially
costs five
started
right
at
now.
one. I think he means the draw.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry, the
the
draw,
draw.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so initially it
Yeah,
was five costs, and then the opponent draws one, and
yeah,
we push it up to
probably.
draw two. And for whatever
Um,
reason, we initially were like, we can't have it be three.
three is a lot of cards. Like, jeez.
Three makes it very playable. Like at that point, it gets out of the jank territory, and it's like, I might actually consider this now.
You could probably proc this like four or five times in a turn, especially with things like photo album or like other passive draws, and then you just like grip hook them afterwards, and that's always a fear. I don't think it would be metagame warping at all, especially if it still costed five and it's a location.
I think that's a probably a good decision for early on design, right? It's still
Yeah.
trying to find out exactly what does it and doesn't work, so it makes sense. The next card on the main ones I had some questions around, Bowing to the Hippogriff. Obviously, it was based on a card that already existed, right? Like very similar to Bravado, but just for creatures. What would you have done differently there? So, like, what was the intent of the design? Was it to try and really bring very big creatures into the foreground playable, or was it sort of for just hitting that 8 power cost sort of?
Yeah, I think I was probably the one that made Bowing to a Hippogriff. I want to say that because I was like, I think it started as a card to make Aragog playable.
Well, I think it also went in relation to Hagrid because Hagrid we found really focus like people focus on small creatures with Hagrid because
Mm,
he just made all the small
yeah.
creatures playable at that point. And this we were like, you can't play big creatures. Like they're easy to removal. They are hard to play in the first place. They don't do enough when you get them out later in the game to do enough damage to like matter. And we wanted to make them more playable. And so I had initially had that this just provides 3 creature power till end of turn. And that's when Huimin was like, that's not how this game words stuff. And then you changed it to be
Yes.
3 less
Oh,
power.
okay.
And initially, it actually had at the end of your turn, you may return an F lesson from your discard pile to your hand, which was a really cool thing. I kind of wish this still had that on there.
I do too.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds great.
Yeah, like I'm not sure why we took that off. But it looks like during test playing, we decided that shouldn't be on there. So we took it
Um,
off, and then it became what it is.
yeah,
But
now it's
yeah.
very weak. It is
I
what it
don't think it's
is.
really weak because like this does still help something. It just doesn't help enough. It just does not help enough. Maybe if it had been
Yeah.
4 less power, it'd be different. This is like a spoiler for very far in the future, but we are going to be kind of focusing on big stuff for a future set. And maybe there will be better iterations of this in that future set that focuses on big stuff.
I think this was part with Security Troll is the other card in the set that was like we want
Yeah.
to provide support for large creatures. You can see how well that turned out. Security Troll as well also is not played.
I mean, that's got many other issues, but yes.
Yeah, it's a cool card though, Security Troll. I think it might
Agreed,
be
yeah.
playable
Yeah.
at some point. So I have high hopes for this card. It may go somewhere, it may not. But I think if I could change Bowing to a Hippogriff, I would probably just make it so that playing the creature doesn't require a action to play. So you don't feel so bad when your creature gets removed because you only spent 1 action to play it instead of that was your entire turn and it just died to picking on Neville or something.
Looking at the creatures that we have in our game, there's a few around that 8 cost, right? So Fang,
Mhm.
Mountain Troll, you've got Norwegian Ridgeback and the Hebridean Dragon that both discard lessons. Fang does as well. And then you've got Aragog to discard lessons. So it sort of made sense that you were, I think, did you even have, yeah, Buckbeak as well, discard a
Yeah.
lesson. So
Yeah.
that definitely feels like it would have made sense. But as far as the impact of bowing from the hippogriff, it feels like if you're playing big creatures, you'll be playing an abundance of lessons where you want to get up to that power quickly. Do you think maybe the reason this doesn't see as much play is because there's just not a creature at 8 or 9, for example, that's impactful enough to warrant trying to play this really, really quickly?
I think, like was previously said, I think it's the action. I think if you could just play the creature for free, this would be very,
Much,
very playable and played all the time. I think
yeah.
it's
I don't think
the
so.
action. You don't?
I don't think so. No, I'm so super down on big creatures. Like I just don't
Oh.
think that they're good enough. I think 3 cost reduction is not enough. If you want to play like the biggest, best big creature, which is a Braxton right now, you're still paying 9 after bowing to a Hippogriff. Like that's kind of prohibitively expensive.
Especially when we've got transfer like, was it transformation?
Moonlit transformation.
Moonlit
Moonlit
Transformation,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
which gets it out for 8. Like that's much nicer. But maybe there's going to be something that you want to get out at 5 because like getting an 8 cost card out for 5 seems pretty strong to me. When your opponent's playing Marble Gargoyle, you're playing, I don't know, like a giant dragon or something. There's nothing at that cost, I think, that you'd want to get out so soon that gives you enough like reward for your risk. The higher you go, the like less impact this card has because what's the real difference between that ramping to 9 and ramping to 12?
The third card I wanted to ask about, a little bit more off the cuff, but it seems like it has, again, a very, very specific design. And I want to
Mhm.
know what drove that design is Hooch Watcher's Practice. So the card is a Quidditch card, obviously, costs 6. It's an event. And it reads, when a match is discarded from play, you may return it to play under its owner's control. If you do, discard this card. So what was the intent of that one particularly? Like, is there an intent to have a match in the future that loves being recurred like this? Or was it for a match toolbox deck where you wanted to play solving matches a lot or something like that?
I think this card existed in that like kind of dream pie in the sky
Magical
match
Christmas
combo
Land.
deck. Yeah, like you play 3 month long, right? And then you have Hooch Watches practice and play, and then you can be like, oh, I'm gonna catch the snitch twice and deal 30 damage to my opponent in 2 actions.
Right,
And I
yeah.
think it originally costed two,
Yeah, it
and then
costed
it
two
went
at
up to
first.
6. And that was
Yeah.
probably a mistake. I think 6 is like prohibitively expensive
I think
Usually
like
for most
matches out
four
to
decks.
maybe would
one.
be good.
Yeah, four,
Because
3.
yeah, because we still want the player to do work to get this effect,
Mhm.
but we don't want it to be like as much work as six is.
Even though like it doesn't do anything to like the dream catch the snitch deck, I think being a little bit more generically playable in decks that do actually just want to win lots of matches, and Hooch Watch's practice is actually just like another copy of all of your matches that you care about, which
Yeah.
is pretty decent.
One other thing I think that we struggle with a lot, and I don't know if it's because we are not good at this or because matches are just a difficult thing to design around. But we've designed a couple of cards with the intention to make matches playable and winnable and like make that kind of deck actually work in a competitive sense. And this kind of helps with that. As Women said, you could do like a weird catch the snitch followed by another catch the snitch in the same turn for like 30 damage or something. So like we're trying to do these things, but matches are just inherently a difficult card type to build a competitive deck around and to design around where it's not just broken. So I think that this was one of those attempts. It works and it doesn't work.
Mostly doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yep.
Mostly doesn't.
Well, it seems like though maybe again it's just one of those things where the environment doesn't support it. It doesn't have enough support. Maybe one day there will be a match that's easy enough to actually have the like warrant this where you don't need to
Mhm.
play a third card to
Yeah.
with like swallowed snitch or something like that,
Yeah.
catching the snitch or whatever to finish it
Mhm.
off. You can just have it naturally occur within the deck. But I think the reason I wanted to mention this one is because and something we're going to do from now on in the podcast is do a little bit of a spoiler of the upcoming set and just talk about one card, give a little brief overview. But that's the reason I wanted to talk about Hooch Watchers practice is because obviously the next set Quidditch World Cup is on the horizon after Goblet of Fire being the last set. So there's obviously a match in that set coming up, and that's the one I wanted to talk about with this because maybe helps out a little bit here. The solve clause on this match, I don't know if you agree, Sammy, is maybe it's still something that doesn't work with Hooch Watch's practice, but
I think Hooch Watches is going to help this match a lot. The prize on the match is definitely worth it.
yeah,
But it's a lot of damage that you need to deal.
the card World Cup final. That's what we're going with at the moment. It might not. Obviously, all of this is still in design, so it might not be the final thing. But to your point, Homin, is that yeah, it is quite a hefty amount of damage to do. Currently, the solve for this is, or the two win is to do 17 damage, but there's a little asterisk there on that one. This one can't be won in alternative ways. You can't win it with a catch the snitch or a swallowed snitch. This specifically states this match cannot be won except by the two win clause. But again, to what you were saying, Sammy, that it is quite a hefty reward on this one. The winner of the match gets an extra action for the rest of the game. And the big thing about that one is it can't be taken away. There's
Mhm.
a few things in the game, like Seamus, you can discard cards and pretty much do that every turn, or there might be, your items that are on the money, like your sickle and gallon and stuff like that, that can give you the extra action, or Angelina as a starter. There's a few things, but all of them can be interacted with. This is just forever. So very, very powerful win clause, but yeah, maybe the hooch, if the game evolves in a way where healing is getting quite big, you've got
Yeah.
people playing pretty much every deck will have Pomfrey in there somewhere maybe. And that's a lot of healing to get through constantly. So if people
Yeah.
are doing lots and lots of healing, doing 17 damage a couple times is definitely not off the books anymore.
There might also or there is unexplored design space in changing the amount of damage you need to do to win matches, or cards that will add progress to matches without actually having dealt the damage yourself. We see that in like the biased referee and oh gosh, what's the one card that like swaps your progress with your mat in the match with your opponent?
Oh,
Quidditch
Yeah.
Confidence, that one.
yeah.
What a sick card. So like sometimes you don't actually have to deal all that 17 damage yourself. It can
Yeah.
be supplemented in other ways.
Yeah, it could be reduced or something like that. Or,
Yeah.
as you were saying, just added to it. But like, yeah, I mean, they start stacking up. You get one action, or even if you ever get a second action, if the game evolves in that way and you start getting a third action that just can't be taken away from you ever, maybe it makes it
Yeah.
worth playing Hooch Watchers practice or
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's possible.
I love the card because
Um,
Quidditch is the best, but you know.
something.
yeah. And at that point as well, like since you're going so late, a six cost is not really that big of a deal.
Not
Um,
prohibitive anymore, no.
With that, do you guys have any
no, no,
like
no, no, no.
oh go ahead.
Sammy, Riss also put perfume smoke on here with a question mark.
Uh-huh.
I take great offense to this. What is wrong with this card? This card is perfect.
I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't write anything.
Uh, that card is amazing. I actually really, really, really like Perfume Smoke because it does absolutely nothing. It draws you two cards, but it costed you a card, so it's only drawing you one card.
And then it also costs you an action, so it's
Yeah.
negative a card.
Yeah, and then you put a card in your hand and shuffle it into your deck. Like, what is this card even doing? You're doing
It's
absolutely nothing when you play it, but it's
no,
amazing.
no. You know what this card does? For one power, you can see one card deeper than you previously could.
Yeah, I guess. But this was like trying to like help the cards that say your like combo deck required you to have something in your deck that you later discarded or like found in some other way, and then you accidentally drew that card. So you play Perfume Smoke in your deck so you can get it back into your deck. It's like 100% jank, but that's why it exists and that's why it's in divination.
Yeah, so it's bad brainstorm.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
But
Which
it
has
has combo potential.
not even just combo potential. I mean, you can protect cards that you need to draw in later turns, right? Like if your opponent's playing
Yes.
cards that make you discard, maybe you need to like put a card back. Maybe you really hate the cards in your hand, and that's it. You do this and then play one of the advanced lessons that shuffle the deck for you. If Magic is a reflection of Harry Potter in some way, or there is enough similarities between them, this card's actually ban worthy.
Sure.
It would need to say
Sure.
like take an extra action or something. Um,
Oh, something, yeah.
or hey, you really like Madame Maxime, right? This procs Madame Maxime for
It
one.
does.
So good.
Fantastic. Yeah, I
Jinky
Yeah.
gotta
territory.
I gotta
It's
rebuild that deck.
yeah, it's basically like your copies 5 through 8 of Rod in Her Minds.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
good stuff.
exactly the same as
Yeah.
copies 5 through 8. Yeah.
Anyways, sorry, Sammy, back to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so do you guys have any last thoughts about Prisoner of Azkaban before we wrap up?
Yeah, actually, I think despite ending on like what are these cards flaws and what would you have done differently to make them playable. I think the standout cards that we walked through there. I mean, there's a few standouts in our favorites that we didn't go through even that are really
Oh
good
yeah.
cards.
Just list
You
them
got
off.
yeah, you got Brass Scales, 12 Years we talked about a bit.
Yeah.
Egyptian Holiday is a great build around that just doesn't have enough tournament space to see play. You've got
I
Cadogan,
think
which is a fan favorite.
oh yeah.
Like people are playing Spew just to play Cadogan.
Yeah.
So I think there are amazing cards designed in this set, especially for only the second go around for this revival team. So yeah, really well done job overall.
I do think that right after PoA came out, there was a lot of people that were playing like the Egyptian Holiday, Lucius Kane, Gringotts package. That got
Yeah,
really
I remember that.
annoying, but that's mostly fallen out of favor these days. I don't know. I still feel like it's a pretty strong package to like put into any potions charms deck.
Yeah, I think the whole Kane thing is super strong, but I think other things have other shiny things have grabbed people's attention. And maybe
Yeah.
one day Kane will grab their attention again, but right now other shiny things are winning.
Yeah. People have chase after the newest fad, and the old things are left in the dust. How unfortunate.
Usually.
But it was a great set overall. I think that's
Yeah.
was my
Yeah.
main takeaway. So
I'm a lot happier with this set than I am with HOS.
I think it got better once Echoes of the Past came out, but overall it's not bad.
Just because there were like a lot of things that like were setups for Echoes of the Past, and we knew going into it that like some of these things were half baked and like would
Yeah.
only become full baked after EOTP.
But with that, thank you everybody for tuning in and listening to us talk about our design process and our thoughts on Prisoner of Azkaban. It was a fun set and started out a really great, just kind of block of cards for that book and helped to teach us a lot of stuff going into the Goblet of Fire design as well. Make sure you follow all of our socials down in the comments, and there's an upcoming tournament that should be announced soon that will take place in the beginning of May. So we'll be talking about that. We also have a set release coming up. We have a BNR update coming up. So the next 2 months are going to be quite full of a lot of things and a new way to play the game with draft. So we're super excited to show all of this to you guys. We'll chat with you all on Discord and everything else, and we'll see you.
Peace.
bye.